We're going to stay on the topic at hand. Last night's what likely to be the last presidential debate of the 2024 season. This one between J.D. Vance, Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidates. Clear signals in the polling data today that J.D. Vance won. But we got to see in the performance last night a person very calmly describing how Trump policies hold together, why there's an intellectual underpinning to them, and also why they're designed to benefit the everyday working man and working woman in America compared to the elitist plans that Democrats have put forward. I thought we would turn, since it's Wednesday, so we have AMAC Wednesday, to our good friend Bobby Charles to give us some great analysis and insight. Bobby, good to have you back on the show.
John, it's good to be on the show in a day of good news, not just bad news.
Yeah, no, exactly. A remarkable night last night for two reasons. This felt like a presidential debate that could have been had 25 years ago. It was civil. It was cerebral. It was mostly policy oriented. Let's leave the moderators out. They weren't that good. But the people got to see a kind exchange. They found two guys who were willing to agree with each other sometimes. They didn't have to fight to get their points across. And I think on point after point after point, J.D. Vance seemed to get the upper hand in just describing calmly how Donald Trump's policies and record were going to be far different than the Democrat alternative. What was your takeaway?
Yeah, so I agree with everything you just said. A couple of takeaways, John. I think the debate itself reminded people, and in many ways, it reminded people of past debates, and in many ways represents a renaissance of the old respect that we had for a scholar and a gentleman. These two were scholars and gentlemen, however you cut it. I also think that if you examine the way this unfolded, J.D. Vance, honestly, I was so proud to hear this man speak. I mean, first of all, his likability level went from 0 to 150. I mean, he clearly is a man of restraint and humility and generosity and love of others and faith and decency, things that have been missing in the public square for an awful long time, and that many of us wondered if they would ever get back there again. So that was beautiful to see. You know, he seemed to me to almost be a conservative young JFK debating a sort of a funeral director who wasn't really sure where he was and was more glum and sort of stumbling over himself than he was presenting facts. And, you know, in the end, I'll tell you, John, that one of the takeaways that probably doesn't immediately show up in the polling but may over time is that you walk away feeling that J.D. Vance is presidential timber. He is an individual who rose to the occasion calmly, thoughtfully, humbly. When asked afterwards if Tim Walz didn't look unduly nervous, he said, you know, to be honest, I was nervous. Being up there for 90 minutes, you're in front of the American people, introducing yourself. So, of course, you know, people get nervous. But what a kind, generous, gracious way to say, look, we're all human, and I did my best, and he did his best, and let the chips fall where they may. What that really tells you, this is the piece that isn't in the polls yet, is that Donald Trump has exceptionally good judgment when it comes to picking vice presidential candidates, and probably a range of other things that we don't and the independents haven't yet given him credit for. And maybe this is the time to give him credit.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. I think there was a moment after the president picked J.D. Vance that there were some naysayers, even on the Republican side, Kellyanne Conway, folks like that, clearly lobbying against it. But last night, if anyone had doubts that J.D. Vance could step into the job or that J.D. Vance was anything but smart and cerebral and sincere, they kind of go away by 20 minutes into the debate. There's also a thing that, you know, you're a master communicator. That's why you're the national spokesman for AMAC. The way he looked into the camera, the way when Tim Walz made a big fupa, he would just kind of, J.D. Vance would signal with his eyes a little bit that everybody could see visually, all right, you're right, I agree with you. But he didn't have to be mean or pounce on it. That little eye signal, that constant contact in the camera, he was really well trained. It felt like the whole time he was talking to you in your living room, not the debate moderators, even Tim Walz.
Yeah, look, this was a walk-off home run, all right? This was an individual at the top of his game who has repeatedly been at the top of his game in interacting with average, everyday Americans, because he is an average, everyday American. And he does that on the camera well, which not everyone knows how to do. But he's an individual that it tells us or reminds us of our own best values. That is to say, and I'm not talking about political values. I'm talking about personal values. Being a conservative in its fullest, truest Edmund Burke way of thinking about it, Ronald Reagan, Russell Kirk way of thinking about it, is that you are a decent human being, that you are conservative in the way that you hold yourself, that you are someone who respects other people, that you are sensible of your own mortality, sensible of your own limits. At the same time, you know what you know, you believe what you believe, and you don't step away from it. You're centered on principle. And in many ways centered also on the concept that other people matter if you're in the public service. If that's what you're about, if you're a neurosurgeon, then you're about the patient on the table. If you're a public servant, you're about the average citizen just trying to ask, please, would you do your best for me? The other thing about him that I thought was very Reagan-esque, and it's probably unfair to make these comparisons, and it's Colin Powell-esque, is that he did not take what could have been viewed as insults personally. This is a distinguishing feature of true leaders. George Marshall, Colin Powell, Ronald Reagan, even Theodore Roosevelt did not take things personally. It is a great lure, a great failing, a great tendency of the average person, and particularly if you're in politics, to have a thin skin and retort in the way that most of the politicians on the public landscape today do, to take it personally and imagine it's a personal thing. J.D. Vance knew this is way beyond that. Anything that gets said to him is something that was practiced with Walz behind closed doors in order to hit him. And what a gracious, nice thing to see on a public stage, an individual who is a scholar and a gentleman and is unafraid to express his own humility in a way that sort of resonates with the average American.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. He was talking to middle America every moment, and he didn't let the debate moderators get him off course. He didn't allow Tim Walz to get him on course. It was fascinating to watch. Now, there's one moment where he stiffened his back for just a second to make one point, and they were trying to silence him. Let's move on. All right, we lied about fact checking. We fact checked you, but you're not allowed to talk about it. And he just got his way in there, but he did it even there in a congenial way. I want you to referee for a second the media's performance last night, or at least these two CBS hosts. I thought David Murr was going to be the low watermark. I may be changing my opinion on that.
Yeah, so let me make two observations there, John. The 2 points that I think you must be thinking of, or at least one of these two, is his assessment of his description of how asylum is granted and how the Haitian community actually was not there on a traditional. It was not the part of the community that he was being directed to was not about a normal asylum grant. It was about an executive grant, which is tantamount to allowing someone in illegally, particularly if the policies of the executive doing the granting is saying that you're allowed to be there when really you're not allowed to be there. The second was his own fact checking on and very earnestly asking Tim Walz to defend a statute in abortion that it does very directly textually. He was absolutely right. Textually permits an abortion at the 9th month and after birth, which is a murder. So he was very thoughtful. He didn't use those words. He simply earnestly asked for a correction. With respect to the media, I think this was a true low watermark. These two referees, if you will, were they weren't referees at all. They were playing for the other team, and it was crystal clear. I actually will tell you that a lot of the focus groups that I've read this morning looked at the way in which these two female moderators really pounced on J.D. Vance in particular, and almost. I'm trying to think of the right word, but with a certain degree of venom, cut him off repeatedly as if they possessed the power in that room to silence these two candidates who were actually have stepped into the public arena. God bless the public arena. Go back and read TR's speech about the man in the arena, where you're invariably dealing with critics, and they've stepped up and risked themselves in order to serve the rest of us. I thought it was a disgraceful presentation on the part of the two moderators, because instead of being balanced and thoughtful and dignified themselves, they lowered themselves to the level of being what I'll call sort of ground level partisans and sort of acrimonious. And, Americans watching, we have this, some of us have this historical standard of people like Walter Cronkite and David Brinkley and Howard K. Smith.
Yeah, Jim Lehrer, yeah.
Jim Lehrer. We expect a certain degree of honesty, earnestness, and impartiality on the part of someone who's moderating or intermediating a debate. That did not happen here. So, frankly, those two probably should never moderate a debate again.
Yeah, no, I think that's. I think a lot of people walked away with that, and I think you're right. I mean, I just thought about the other great debate moderators over history. Would a Peter Jennings have acted that way? Walter Cronkite? No. The answer is no. Even if they had their own political partisan views, they always made sure that their persona and their conduct in a debate rose above that. And last night that wasn't the case. And I think at the end of the day, they maybe the biggest loser, even more than Tim Walz was the CBS News and its moderators. We'll have to see how.
Well, I think, John, they should take a lesson from J.D. Vance, because what has happened is professionalism has vanished from the journalistic world. I have very, very close friends. This will shock you. I have close friends who are former senior editors at the Washington Post, and they tell me that the journalistic standards that they were held to, even back in the days of Woodward and Bernstein and all that, when it was partisan, nevertheless, they held themselves to a standard that had to do with honesty and integrity and interviews and trying for impartiality. They said today what happens in these newsrooms is these young kids, and those are basically a couple of young hosts or moderators, they come up with a storyline, they know what they believe, and then they just go punch it into Google, find a few facts, and present it as a story. They don't do the interviews. They don't do the serious journalistic work that people historically have expected of journalists. And so I would say, you know what? Those two moderators ought to sit back, quiet themselves, and watch that debate again and see how J.D. Vance conducted himself, and then go take a lesson from it.
Yeah, I think that's very wise advice. All right. We're lucky every week you come on the show, and we've had this compass set for the moment that we're in now, that the economy would still be bad in October, and something like a single event, a strike might, like what we're seeing with the longshoremen right now, could tip the balance of the economy back to even more painful moments. And then, of course, you have been putting a circle around Iran for a long time, telling us that all those billions we gave are not only going to play out through the proxies, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis, but also in Iran directly attacking Israel. And that happened this weekend. Both of these are things that Biden and Harris have to own, and there's only 40 days left in the election. How much do these current events reinforce the sense of Americans that things are going in the wrong direction? Something that 70% of Americans already say is the case.
I think, John, it's self-evident. What both of these events, the strike, which Biden could have interceded and prevented, which incidentally, Reagan interceded, Truman interceded, Theodore Roosevelt interceded in stopping strikes. And this is a power that exists and is usually used by a president.
Biden interceded in an earlier strike, right, where the economic impact per day was only $2 billion. This one is $5 billion. It's like incomprehensible that he picked one and not the other.
Well, it is, and I think, we're assuming a certain cognitive level of engagement that would cause him to do the picking. So, but let's just say this. I think that both of these create a sense of a sense that, and in the Middle East right now, with Iran aggressively going after Israel and Israel having to respond aggressively, at the end of the day, this is like a double whammy. This is the demonstration of the irrelevance and incompetence of this administration, with an exclamation point at the end. The Israelis and everybody in the world is ignoring Biden-Harris as it relates to that conflict because they believe, and they are right, that basically since Afghanistan, this is a runaway appeasement White House that has no concept of how to conduct foreign policy, never mind protect the national security or the security of our allies. And at home, this is an administration which has essentially become hands-off, at the same hands-off in terms of resolution of things like a management labor strike, but at the same time has pushed massive fiscal irresponsibility. One of the reasons that this strike is happening is what they call inflationary expectations, and historically, inflationary expectations go from rational to irrational, which is what's happened here. And that is all. So what does that mean? It means that if I expect 1% increase next year, I bargain for 1%. If the next cycle it goes to 3, then the cycle after that I expect 5. If it jumps to 9, which it did in August of 2022, I then am not sure what the hell's going to happen. So I argue for 17. I argue for a 60% increase over 5 years, which is what the unions are arguing for. Now, Reagan broke that cycle, and he broke it, which is exactly what Trump will do if he's elected. He broke it by saying, no, we're not going to have fiscal irresponsibility anymore. We're going to scroll back on fiscal spending. We're going to get debt under control. We're going to lower interest rates. And so inflation will, in fact, come back down, which is what he did. He brought it down to 1% in January of 2021. How unbelievable. We haven't seen 1% inflation in this country since way back. I mean, that was probably what happened at the very beginning of the Reagan term when they were turning off the Carter recession, and which was double digit interest and double digit inflation. So bottom line here is this economy is stumbling because of Biden-Harris. It will only stumble further. Will it fall on its face between now and November? Probably not. It will, however, I think we are going to see very clear signs of recession, and this strike, which was preventable, is going to trip a lot of wholesalers, retailers, transportation sector, energy sector. It's going to really throw a monkey wrench into what was already a stumbling economy. So are we going to end up with, we've got these cross currents, John. The Fed just lowered interest rates by 0.5 point, which is supposed to be boosting the economy. But, at the end of the day, people don't live off lowered interest rates. They live off the food and the energy that comes to their doorwell and their doorstep. And if in fact, this administration continues to be feckless is the only word I can think of, John. This is a completely feckless group of people. They live in their own brains. They drink their own Kool-Aid. They promulgate their own fictional descriptions of the world, from Bidenomics to appeasing Iran and thinking that's going to do us some good. At the end of the day, we just need rational, normal, I'll go back to it again, rational, normal, gentlemanly people who are able to conduct a predictable domestic and foreign policy that allows the rest of us to live our lives in a normal way.
Yeah, it's a simple prescription. I think people got a dose of it last night. It felt good. But I probably haven't felt that in a while. It felt good last night for a lot of people watching a debate like that because it just felt civil and cerebral. Bobby, as always, you do such amazing work. AMAC does such amazing work to keep it easy to vote, hard to cheat, to make sure that non-citizens don't vote. Anyone who's listening today who hasn't joined AMAC, this is your moment. You got 35 days to work through a 2.2 million person army that is AMAC and help this country have a good election, just a secure, confident election. Here's what you do. Go to amac.us/justnews, amac.us/justnews. You'll get a huge discount on a membership this month. Go do it. Go join an army of patriots like Bobby and like me. I'm a proud AMAC member, and make a difference in these last 35 days of the election. It'll be the best money you spend all year. I promise you that. Bobby, we love these conversations. I can't wait to have them again soon. We'll be back next week with it. But thanks so much for joining us and giving us all that great analysis on the debate.
I really appreciate it, John. And, every state in this country has tens of thousands of AMAC members. And they go out there, they care about this country. Maine, where I am right now, has 10,000 AMAC members. And they go out, they're poll watchers, they care about the future. So if you care about the future, anybody listening, and you want to be part of this family, just sign up and join AMAC, and by God, it'll please you every day of the year.
Yeah, you're not hiring a service; you're joining a community of patriots. It is such an amazing experience. I'm still numb with excitement from all the fun we had in Long Island with the latest boot camp for boomers. It's amazing people up and down the AMAC ladder.
I want to leave you with one last 10-second bite, and that is I just released a book, John, called Cherish America, Stories of Courage, Character, and Kindness. This book, you can go to Tower Publishing. You can get it immediately, towerpub.com. In fact, if you get more of them, it's cheaper. They just was released, Cherish America. But in that book is a chapter on Dan Weber and the way in which Dan Weber, founder of AMAC, actually perfectly parallels what Alexander de Tocqueville said would be the destiny of this country. Associations dedicated to the proposition of saving the freedom that Americans enjoyed and that Europeans, incidentally, did not enjoy at that time. So I'll tell you, these are 50 stories that will make you cry, laugh, and be so proud of this country. And the foreword of the book is written by Buzz Aldrin, Apollo 11 astronaut.
Doesn't get better than that.
You can't get better than that. I was blessed, and we're all blessed, John. So cherish America, towerpub.com. And I'll tell you, we live in a great country. We just have to remember that.
We're going to put out a tweet on X and on Truth Today to make sure people have that link. We'll make it easy. We'll also put it up on the Just the News website so people can find it easily. It is
awesome.
A literary masterpiece from one of the smartest people I know in my entire career. Bobby, always an honor to have you on, my friend.
John, I just love being on your show. Thank you so much again.
We love having you, buddy. All right. We'll do it again next week. It was that much fun. All right, folks, that wraps up another edition of John Solomon Reports, the podcast from Just the News. A big thank you to our guests, Mike Huckabee, Lee Zeldin, and, of course, Bobby Charles. Great show today. More ahead tomorrow. We got some good guests. Don't despair. An interesting couple of days ahead with some great interviews. We'll be back tomorrow with regular programming. Until then, God bless you and have a great night.